Well, hello. Welcome to our T101 Q&A panel. For those of you who are joining us online right now, we are glad that you are here. Over the next few moments, I'm going to introduce to you our two guests, who are Melissa and Solomon, and we get a chance to delve into what are some of the things that you might be expecting and preparing for as you head to whether it's college or university in the next few weeks. So we are glad that you're here, and by all means, for those of you who are joining on live, we'd love for you to ask any questions in the meantime, so feel free to add that into the chat, or you can also send that through transition101.ca/panel. So in a moment, I'm going to ask both of our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we're going to give you a little bit more details about some of the people who've been sponsoring this webinar, and then we're going to kick into our questions. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Alvin. I work with the Canadian Baptists of Ontario and Quebec, and we are pleased to be one of the sponsors and hosts for this Q&A. So first, I'm going to ask Melissa, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm going into my second year of kinesiology at Brock. Yeah.
Great. And Solomon?
Hello, everyone. My name is Solomon, and I study computer science at Waterloo. I just finished my final year of my undergrad, and I'll be going to my first year of my master's there.
Sounds exciting. We'll have to ask you about your master's at another time. But in the meantime, just want to give you, for those who are watching, I just want to give you a quick heads up about some of the groups that have been participating in this. As you might know, there are various different campus groups that serve across many different colleges and universities. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the ones serving in Ontario universities. First of all, we have our friends at Ambassadors for Christ of Canada. They've been around for over 45 years now. And while their primary heritage is of Asian descent, they're primarily aiming to seek God in those different ways, navigating what it means to know Him, to serve Him. Some of you who have been to maybe some different events like today's, like Teens Conference. There's a lot of Teens Conferences out there, but the Teens Conference, for those who know about Campus Challenge and other ministries like that, those are the things that they're involved in, and they have groups across most campuses in Ontario. Next, we have InterVarsity. InterVarsity Christian Fellowship has been around since 1928. Some of you might be familiar with some of the camps that they have, whether it's Pioneer or Circle Square Ranch, but they also have many different campus groups available across Ontario universities. And they've just started up their high school ministries as well. And leading into, for those of you who are finishing up with your undergrad, heading into workplace ministries, that's another initiative that they're starting to set up that some of you might be interested in the next 3 or 4 years when you're finishing up your undergrad. We also have Navigators, who have been founded in 1930. And one of the key things that they focus on is one-on-one discipleship. And so they're available at some different campuses in Ontario. And so if that's something that you're more interested in and having that one-on-one kind of discipleship setup, Navigators might be a place for you. And finally, we want to introduce to you Power to Change, or P2C. Their whole premise is to help those who are part of their group to take their next step towards Jesus. Some of you might be familiar with their ministry called Next Steps, which has been something that has been helping high school grads take the next step into post-secondary. They also have scholarships available, and so that might be something that you're interested in. And again, they have many groups across Ontario as well. And so on that note, we're going to bring in our two panelists here, and we've got a bunch of questions set up here, but also for those of you who are online right now, live, if you'd like to submit a question, feel free to put that in the chat. But the first one, I want to throw this one to, let's start with Melissa here. Let's go back memory lane here a bit. And Melissa, right now, kind of in the middle of August, a couple of years ago, when you were about to head, actually, I guess, yeah, when you were about to head into your first year, what were some things that you had already gotten ready by this point? And what are some things at this point you hadn't prepared yet?
So by this point, I already had gotten in contact with the Christian group at my school, which is InterVarsity. So that was really nice to just already know who they were. I already had pretty much gotten everything for my dorm because I love shopping. So that was good. Something that I'd been procrastinating though was getting textbooks, which I highly recommend getting a jump on that. And I guess just figuring out a class schedule. Also, looking at, I don't know how early, I can't remember how early the syllabi comes out, the syllabus is, but definitely getting a head start on those, which I did not do that, which I recommend. Yeah.
What about you, Solomon? What do you remember back in those days?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, definitely getting things ready for living on residence. So that's like just bedding and whatever clothing is necessary for that. Just taking a look at the class schedule, kind of knowing sort of how the time is going to be divided in the week. Unlike Melissa, which I think that was a pretty good idea, getting connected with a Christian group ahead of time, I actually didn't have that going into my undergrad. So for that, I had to find a Christian group while I was already on campus. But even that was it was still a good process doing that. But yeah, I mean, you don't always know what to expect, but as long as you have you have a place to be and your classes and everything, then you're good to go, good to start undergrad. So
So Solomon, let me just stick with you for a moment there. Uh, Stepping onto campus for a lot of people can feel intimidating. What would you suggest are the top maybe 2 or 3 things that a frosh should do in the first 72 hours of arriving on campus?
yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that you should definitely do, and this is especially true if you live on residence, is just, get familiar with some of the people that are around you. Something to kind of remember is that the people around you who are in first year are all in the same boat. Many of them are coming in from a different city, or even if they're not coming in from a different city, it's still a new environment for them. So a lot of people are going to still have that nervousness with them. So that should kind of help you when you're when you're interacting with these new people, just getting familiar with that. So that's one thing I would say definitely. Just familiarize yourself with the people who are kind of around you. A second thing I would say is, uh, look and see if you can find out where your classes are, because you may not have classes right when you arrive to campus. So as long as you know where where the buildings are, that could definitely help make things less stressful. And then another thing I would say is, if you're going to another city and you have a bus pass available, just go for a bus ride and just kind of see what the city looks like. You don't have to go too far if you don't want to get lost, but at least just having a kind of general sense of, okay, the supermarket's here, and this is over here and this is over here. That could help keep you from being too intimidated with being in a new environment. So those are some things I would say to definitely do in the first couple of days of starting your undergrad.
Great, Melissa. What about you? What are a couple of tips that you would suggest a frosh stepping into campus would do in the first 3 days?
In the first few days, I definitely agree with Solomon. Get to know the people around you. I was in residence, and luckily, um, our like residence leaders, they wanted us to get to know each other. So we actually went down for dinner as a floor that night, that first night that we were there, and we had like a whole event for our residents. So we got to know people who we lived with really fast. So get to know everybody on your floor, who you're living with. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's nervous, so you're not going to embarrass yourself by going introducing yourself. Also, try to sign up for as many Frosh Week events as possible. Try to go to as many as possible. Even if you're an introvert, it just lasts 1 week. Just go out as much as possible before school, like before class starts, and you won't regret it. Yeah.
Those are some great tips that you've both shared there. Let's take a little step back here, because I know there may be some things that people haven't necessarily thought of just yet. And one of the things I do wonder about is that for everyone who steps onto campus, at the end of the day, I would think that, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong, I would think that for almost every person who steps on, they're trying to understand, well, how do I belong here? What does it mean to belong in this place, whether it's your campus group or whether it's on, with your res or anything else. Melissa, let me throw this one to you first. For you, as a frosh, how were you able to take the initiative to belong to a community?
Um, yeah, I feel like you can belong to like a multiple different amount, like different communities, whether that's like different clubs, Christian communities, or your program. So I guess talking to a lot of people in your program, you instantly have that connection. So you can kind of feel like you belong with those people in your program. And then the same thing with the Christian community. Get to know the people there. That's already, you have a thing in common. You already feel like you can belong. Um, Stuff like that definitely helps you feel like you're in with the people, even though you just met them. Just finding things in common. Yeah.
No, it's helpful. And Solomon, let me ask you this, because part of it is, I remember as you shared with me a little bit about your own faith journey. How have you seen your own faith evolve? From the time that that you started off as a grad slash frosh, now that you're done your undergrad and moving on to your master's, what has that journey been like?
Yeah, so the journey has been very different, I think, than what I anticipated. So before going into university, I was kind of surrounded by either I was at high school where there wasn't a lot of there wasn't really a Christian community to be part of, or I was part of my church, which was very I grew up with these people, so you kind of know how everyone thinks. Um, but as I went to university, I kind of recognized and saw all the different perspectives that people had, whether they were Christian or non-Christian. Oftentimes, particularly in my second year, I'd come across people who had different sort of ideas about things. A lot of the times these were non-Christians. And so this kind of pushed me to grow more in my faith, to read more of the Bible, and kind of understood what it said, and how to communicate with these people in that regard. And then, of course, discussing with other Christians who perhaps had different viewpoints, had different kind of ways of looking at life, and just being able to do that has allowed me to kind of mature in my own beliefs, and mature in how I treat others, how I talk to Christians and non-Christians alike.
Actually, Melissa, I'm going to jump off something that Solomon just said there for a moment. He just mentioned that there's different perspectives that people have. I mean, I know for some people, when they head to university, they hear about some of the classes and some of the profs who might really challenge someone with a Christian faith. What were some ways that you were able to help navigate those kinds of situations?
I think I had a very similar experience to Solomon, where you talk to so many different people with so many different perspectives of faith, or like even atheism or whatever. It really challenges your faith in different ways that I wasn't expecting. And it brings a lot of growth, because once you start having those conversations, you can grow and really think about those things in different ways, and go to the Bible or go to your Christian group to really talk about that. And it just brings up new things that you haven't thought of before. So then next time in discussions, or when you have a little bit of kickback, that you can bring those things up and you can be prepared for those things as well.
No, and so let me lean into a little bit more on that, Melissa. In terms of
Okay.
what were ways that InterVarsity was able to, because that's the group, as I remember, that's the group that you were with from the beginning. And so what were some ways that those kinds of campus groups were able to help facilitate those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, so for InterVarsity, our group was kind of unique, because we'd end up sitting down for like a Bible study and then just go off on a whole tangent of a whole different thing. We'd have like really deep discussions, and we'd also have very spirited but nice debates. It could seem like it was getting heated, but we'd have like really good debates about our faith, and like not about our faith, but like about how we see things differently. And we've also had people of different denominations come in. And I remember one night we had some people come in, and we had just such a spirited debate, and it really just got everybody thinking. And that just, I feel like that really helped people think about how to talk about those things. I don't know, but it definitely challenged us, because we'd have those kind of conversations.
So have there been moments when maybe eh, have there been moments when maybe you that really kind of shook you a bit? And so how are you able to handle those kinds of moments?
Um, I've actually had some moments this past year where I was like, because I've only come to my faith over the past few years, so I have lost what I used to think was my life and a lot of the stuff of the world. So then when I come to face those things, we're like, well, I can't do that anymore. And like, I can't live like that anymore. And I just felt like I was really struggling and being hit with things where people are like, oh, like you're a Christian, you can't be doing that. And it was definitely hard to handle because I was like, okay, well, I feel like I can't do anything now, which obviously is not the case. So to kind of handle that, I really talked to some girls and some other people in my group, and I was like, give me your honest advice. Even if it hurts my feelings, I need your honesty. I need you to tell me like what you think, and then I can build off of that and just prayer, obviously, too. Yeah. I hope this is answering your question. I feel like I might be going off a little bit.
No, I think that's one of the key things, right, that you just mentioned there. The fact that you're able to find a group of people who could be honest with you, right? And I think, I mean, that sounds like it's such. I mean, tell me, the word that comes to my mind is that it sounds like it's an enriching community. Was that a fair way to describe that?
Absolutely. Like I said, we would have those very spirited debates and nobody I feel like our group be honest with each other and nobody's feelings were hurt because it was all in a loving way that we just like wanted to help each other grow and we just wanted to help each other in our faith. So we never took it as, oh, you're being rude, you think of me like this. It was very open, honest, and a safe environment to talk about anything we needed to talk about. So yeah.
Okay. Solomon, let me bring you back into this. So specifically, one of the things I'm curious about is, as Melissa was sharing about the ways that her current group was helping her, kind of navigate some different things of faith. What were some ways that your own church was helping you through that process, either before you were going to school or maybe even while you were at school?
Yeah, so uh, I think definitely through the groups of the young adults groups, I would say. So back at my home church, so I'm from Ottawa, and my home church in Ottawa, I was a part of a young adults group there. And then even when going to Waterloo, because the church that I went to is so close to campus, there were a lot of young adults in that group. So being able to connect with them was very helpful. A lot of the times they have a lot of similar issues, whether it's it can just be everyday things like school and like work, or it can be things like learning how to defend their faith when talking to other people. But just being surrounded by people in that same sort of stage of life and in a community where everyone is trying to learn more about their faith and grow in it, I think that was definitely very helpful. And I was fortunate enough to find that within the church community at Waterloo. Yeah.
Hmm. Curious, Solomon, I'm just going to stay with you for a moment here. Can you give me an example of what some of those, maybe an example of a conversation of what that was like when when you and this group were trying to work some stuff out?
Yes. So one thing that I remember specifically was one of the members of the church that I went to. He was a part of so he did track and field like in his spare time, and I was a part of the varsity track and field team at the University of Waterloo. So in talking with him, the topic of sharing our faith with people in that community kind of came up, and we had a pretty good conversation about it, just because just being in the sports community, I mean, you don't always have that opportunity, or sometimes you don't. It's not always easy to share your faith with people when you're not in that church community. When you're with people who don't believe necessarily, or even if you just don't know what they believe. So after talking with him about it, I was sort of encouraged in that, and uh, going forward, I actually had some more opportunities to share my faith with some of my track and field team members. And so some of them weren't Christian, some of them were agnostic, and then some of them were Christian as well. But just being able to talk to my friend who was a Christian and also in the track and field, like also doing track and field, and being able to relate to him in that way. that encouraged me. That definitely encouraged me to be able to share my faith to that community, just because I knew that it was something that should be done, and just talking it through with someone else kind of gave that encouragement. So
Hmm.
yeah.
No, it's helpful. Melissa, let me come to you with this question. You know, people hear about how, you know, schedules are hard in university, things get flipped upside down, and they hear about the workload and everything else. And as both of you were mentioning how, you know, maybe you're involved in different activities. I mean, Solomon with varsity sports, and there's other clubs and people that are the things that people can get involved in. What are some ways that you're able to help maintain or maybe even develop your faith on your own? What were some practices that you were able to do that helped you keep on track?
Um, so what I used to do, like sometimes you just can't make it to intervarsity or just like whatever, you can't make it to your Christian group that week. Or you can't make it to the young adults at your church, whatever. Um, I kind of set I had a routine. I mean, it's summer, so it's kind of dropped off, but I had a routine like every single night. An hour before I went to bed, I would um always just read my Bible, read a Christian book, just spend that last hour of quiet, no technology, anything. Just spend that time with God. And I also had some friends that we were accountable with. We're like, did you pray tonight? Did you do this? Just even though you're not doing it together, you still have that sense of community with your faith because you're keeping each other accountable, which I found really helped, especially when sometimes um, you're not feeling really good in your faith or things, but that definitely helps a lot when you can't make it there and that still feels like that little piece of community for sure.
So, Solomon, what about you? What are some practices that you've done in your own life to help you keep on track in your faith?
So something that I've done is just being more intentional with reading the books of the Bible completely. So this comes actually kind of from a funny story. I remember one time I was sitting in church while I was in Waterloo. I think this might have been in my second year. Um, but the pastor was trying to figure out what books for what books should they go through for the congregation. So they handed out slips of paper and they asked, us just anonymously fill out what books of the Bible have you read through completely this year, just so that they get a sense of what people have read and what people haven't read. And I was not too impressed with my list, to be honest. So before then, I would kind of just read bits of each book, different chapters or different verses. But since that point, I would be more intentional about, okay, starting a book from the beginning and just reading it through completely. And this has really been helpful just because it has allowed me to kind of gain better understandings of complete books and how they relate to other books and how they all point to Jesus. So that's just something that I've kind of added, just being intentional about reading a book completely through rather than just going, verse to verse or chapter to chapter. So.
Hmm. No, that's a really helpful practice to be aware of, and I think definitely something that challenges many of us to try. And so as we are about to wrap this up, Solomon, let me just stick with you for a moment here. What's one final word of advice you would have for the class of 22?
Something I would say is definitely to persevere when you're facing challenges. I know for me, university was a lot more challenging than high school was, and in university, that was the first time that I've failed a class, and I never had to fail a class in high school. But then in university, it was different. But the thing is, when you persevere, um, there's room to grow, and you can really get through it. So certainly persevering there, and not just academically, but also in your faith. Before university, I was a lot more timid in sharing the faith, but just with more opportunities and kind of overcoming certain fears, I was able to. I'm still not where I want to be, but certainly has gotten a lot better. So I would say just yeah, persevere and be resilient. Yeah.
That's great. What about you, Melissa?
Um, for me, first of all, I want to totally agree with Salman. I have been there when I failed tests, all these things, just you will come out on the other end. Um, but I would say is don't be afraid to try new things and just for I was very timid in high school as well, and I didn't want to go try new things that I didn't think I was capable of, or that people would judge me for. Go try out for that sports team, intramurals, join the clubs. I think it's a really good growing opportunity, and just to challenge yourself as well. I think, yeah.
I think those are both some great words of advice for the rest of us to take with us. And so as we wrap this up, first of all, thank you, Melissa and Solomon. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights, not just for this time, but also we've actually hosted a couple of other Q&A panel discussions before. And so you can find all that at transition101.ca/panel as well. We encourage you to take a look at those and to see if there's some questions that you still have that you might get answers there as well. But on that note, class of 22, as you head into your final weeks of preparation before you step on campus, we continue to pray with you. We are looking forward to seeing what God has in store for you. And so, class of 22, blessings to you as you continue on.